We are going to dive into our stash of fabric scraps to create some beautiful Christmas decor and craft ideas that are sure to brighten up the holiday season. Hey there, it's Donna. I'm happy to have you joining me today. Let's get crafting. I printed out these tree templates from Canva. I'm going to have a link for you to access them if you need some tree templates, but you can find lots of free ones online. I'm going to just cut one out, as I'm going to just share an example of one, but I am going to be making two in total, which I will show you in the end. You can see all I'm going to do is cut around this image with some scissors. If you have a cutting machine like a Cricut, feel free to use that. Or if you can hand draw these nicely, go ahead and do that as well. But I decided to print mine out because I'm just not very good at drawing trees. All right, I've got these scraps of felt in my stash that I wanted to use up. I've got quite a few, so I thought today would be a great day to use some of these scraps up. This is a nice small piece here, and you can see that my little tree fits on one half of this perfectly. I'm going to trace around this with a marker. I wish I actually would have used a green marker. This one's blue, but that's okay. I'll end up cutting around the lines on the inside. So I did trace around the tree twice on the two pieces of felt that I had, and now I'm going to go ahead and cut these both out. If you've been following me for a while now, you will know that I am building on a collection of some different trees, and I wanted to make some out of felt. I have done that last year, but I'm going to be creating a different style with these particular trees. So I am going to go ahead and finish cutting those out, and then I'm going to glue the two pieces together. But I'm going to work in sections, and I'm only adding a tiny bead of glue around the edge, and then I'm going to start to sandwich the two pieces together. Now you can hand stitch this or machine stitch this if you'd like. I find it easiest just to use some hot glue. Once I get near the bottom, I am not going to seal up the very bottom of this tree, and it's because I want to use some fiber fill to make this tree a little bit dimensional. You don't need very much, so I'm going to go ahead and stuff that in, and if you need something, you can use a bamboo skewer, or I am actually going to be using the end of a paintbrush to shove that fiber fill into the little nooks and crannies. So I haven't quite filled it up to my liking quite yet because I am going to be measuring a branch to create a tree trunk for my felt tree. So I'm just going to cut this stem down, and I will be cutting the top part just on a bit of an angle. I figured that will just probably make it easier for me to get the branch up inside the tree. And then once you've got that in place, you can add a little bit more fill as needed. And then I'm going to glue the bottom edge together. So as I glue this together, I'm making sure I'm adding glue on both sides of the branch and in around it. That will help to stabilize the branch as well as keep this into place. All right, so the bottom is all sealed up. I'm going to just cut down my stem, and I'm going to add the tree to this little stump that I had in my stash. You can see it had been painted. That was from a previous project, but you're not going to see that paint as I'm going to be covering that up. But first I needed to put the tree in the glue, and I need that to set up before I let it go. Now I'm going to cover the bottom with some preserved reindeer moss. You could use some faux snow or white reindeer moss as well as Spanish moss, but that's about it. And I can't wait for you to see my full collection. I'm hoping to have that posted for you as we get closer to the holiday. This was a really easy project and a great way to use up some felt. I found that this scrap of Christmas fabric at the thrift store, I'm going to guess that somebody used it to create a quilt or something. I'm not sure, but I just loved the colors. It was something a little different from what I usually use. I'm going to be cutting this down into strips. Now, I didn't realize at first, but this strip was not even on the edge, but that's okay. I'll just set that aside for another project. I'm going to cut down another piece here and then tear that. It's roughly, I'd say, about 2 inches wide. This width doesn't actually matter too much. Just go with what you like. So you can see I'm going to be removing the threads, and this fabric is very wrinkly. So I am going to give it a mist, and then I'm going to be pressing it with my Cricut mini press. And I will say, I absolutely love the Cricut mini press. I didn't realize how great it is to have a little mini press in your craft room. It's not as bulky as a regular iron would be. So if you're interested, I will have a link for you listed down in the description below for you to check out. But yeah, so I'm just pressing this on my Cricut heat mat to get out all those wrinkles. It works really well, and I do have it on the highest heat setting as well. All right, so now I actually just wanted to create some simple fabric bows. So I'm going to do just a couple of basic loops with some tails, and then I'm going to do something that I don't usually do. I usually use wire to tie my bows off, but I thought, you know what? Maybe not everybody's got wire in their craft stash. So I'm going to try using some string to tie this off in the center. This is just some crochet thread, but really all you need to do is just use a really nice sturdy string and then just wrap it around. This fabric is nice and stiff. It's a nice stiff cotton, which helps as well. It's not going to like come apart on me. I just tied a knot, and now I grabbed a piece of this fabric. It was from that first strip that I cut off, and I'm going to wrap it around the center. Again, that's something that I don't usually do, but I thought it would be a really nice finishing touch to hide that string that's in the center. This is looking so pretty. Bows are really on trend this year, and so I thought it would be fun just to show you how you can do one out of some fabric scraps. I just dovetail the ends and that's it. You can use this as an ornament on your tree, or you could even put it on a gift package or make a garland out of a set of these. Since I've been making a lot of fabric scrap crafts, I'm left with a lot of smaller pieces. So I thought it would be really cool just to cut these down into some square shapes and then cover this styrofoam ball. It's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in diameter. And the fabric squares that I'm cutting, I didn't measure these. I just eyeballed it. That's typically how I craft. Don't worry about these being perfect. That does not matter. You're not going to notice. You just want a rough square shape. So I'm just cutting a different selection of some scraps. And yes, I'm going to have some more scraps left over from even this project. But I will eventually show you some ways on how to use those really super tiny scraps. In the meantime, what you're going to do is once you've got your pile all cut down, you're going to put your scraps over a bamboo skewer or something sharp like this and add a little bit of dollop of hot glue on the end and then press that into your styrofoam. You want to hold that for a bit to allow the glue to set and then release it, and that is it. You're going to be covering your entire styrofoam ball with all these different scraps. You can also see that I have the good side of the fabric scrap facing in toward my bamboo skewer and the rough side is facing outward. That way here you'll see the color a little bit better, but of course play around and do this the way you would like to see your fabric scraps show. I decided to even try layering some of my scraps. I have a piece of lace here and just some cotton fabric, and the glue is going to seep through the lace and adhere to both the lace and the cotton fabric, and it is a really, really pretty effect. Here I've got a little bit of some gold glittery tulle, and same thing as the lace, the glue is going to soak through the tulle onto the cotton fabric, and the two will bind together, and it is so pretty. I love all the different textures. You can see how it's looking so far. Just removing some of the loose threads that I had on here, and I'm going to continue to just fill this up, and I'm making sure I'm randomly dispersing all the different colors and textures around the ball of styrofoam as well. If you find that any of your pieces of fabric are a little bit too long, go ahead and just trim those off. I did have a few pieces that were sticking out a little too much and it looked a little funny, so I'm just trimming those up. All right, so here is my ball. It's completely covered, so you can leave this as is and put it in a bowl with a lot of other beautiful items, but I want to turn mine into an ornament. So I'm grabbing this scrap of fabric again. That was that torn piece. This was the perfect width to create a hanger. I just folded it in half, and then I created a loop, tying a knot on the end, trimming off those bottom ends so the knot is all that's left. And then here I'm just finding a little empty spot to adhere my little hanger, creating a hole into the styrofoam so I can press that knot down into that hole. I'm adding a bit of glue, and then I'm going to go ahead and add that knot and pressing it down with my bamboo skewer, and that is it. It is absolutely gorgeous. I can see a full set of these being created as a gift. I think it would be so beautiful. This scrap is absolutely gorgeous. It has got some gold leaves throughout. I don't have very much of this left. I have used it here and there. I thought it would be great to add it to this frame. The frame is gold in color. I'm just going to go ahead and take this apart. I will be using the glass over top of the fabric, and I'm just going to do a rough cut around the glass just so I have a rough idea how big of a piece I will need for my project. So another alternative is, if you don't want to use fabric, you can definitely use some scrapbook paper. So again, I'm going to be using my glass, and I'm going to be tracing around this over top of some foam core board. This is just a piece that I had in my stash. I probably got it from Dollar Tree or from Dollarama. So I traced that out, and then I'm going to be using my steel ruler and a craft knife, and I'm going to be cutting it out. Now, I will admit, I struggle cutting through this. So if you've got a simpler way to cut through foam core board, please let me know down below. It would definitely be helpful, because I'll show you the mess I made here in a moment. So you can see here, I did not cut that very well. I left a real mess on the edges. That's okay, I cleaned it up. I'm using some double-sided tape on the foam core board, and then I'm going to press that into the fabric. I was going to put the fabric on first, and then I decided to flip the fabric upside down and press the foam core board into the fabric. My fabric was really nice and flat, so if yours isn't, I definitely recommend ironing it. So once that's in place, you can then trim off the excess. All right, so now you can start to put this back together. I accidentally broke off a couple of the clips, so I am going to need to put a little bit of a bracket there on the corner just to help hold the backing into place. Just be careful how much glue you add if you do need to do that yourself. So then you can remove the panel, because I like to reuse my frames, especially my favorite frames. Okay, so I have this cute little brass frame that I recently got from the thrift store. It was only 30 cents, and I thought it would be really pretty to include it in a Christmassy project. I have got this scrapbook paper. This is full of different tags, and I thought it would be neat to use one of these images in this cute little frame. So I was kind of going through my different papers. I wanted to try this one that said Merry Christmas on it with the poinsettias, as well as another image that I'm going to show you here in a moment. But all I'm going to do is just cut these out for now, and then I'm going to decide on which image that I would like to use. Another option would be to include a family picture. Say you had a nice family Christmas picture done last year or something. All right, so here is the other image. I actually really like this tree. It has a little bit of gold foiling on it, so it went with the fabric and the frame nicely. I also like this Peace on Earth tag, but first I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to use this Merry Christmas, and I was looking at it. I'm like, yeah, no, I prefer this tree. I don't usually go for stuff with the red in the background, but I don't know, lately I've been liking that a little bit more. So I'm just trimming down that Peace on Earth, and I'm going to be making that dimensional. But first I needed to put the tree image onto a piece of, this is just some chipboard, cutting it down to size again using my glass, and then that will help to make this really nice and sturdy. So I'm just going to use my double-sided tape again and putting it into place on the chipboard. For another added little touch, I decided to use this fern green archival ink with a makeup sponge and just adding a touch of green ink around the edge of the Peace on Earth paper strip that I have here. I just find that doing this will help tie this in nicely with the tree on the other image. So I decided I'm going to try and remove the frame stand here. And I was really struggling with it. So I just pulled off that little piece there, and I still needed to get that chunk of paper off as well as the fastener. So I decided just to rip that off with my needle nose pliers, and there was a little bit of damage done to that backing, but that is okay. We are actually not even going to see that, and it didn't affect the rest of our project in any way. So now I'm going to just start to put everything back together. I'm going to put my tree in place here. I was going to put the glass in place and then the backing, but as I was trying to put the backing into place, I realized that the glass just was not going to work. So I will be setting that aside for the future if I ever want to take this apart and use the frame for another project. So I'm going to put the backing in, but I noticed that the backing was kind of hanging down a little bit. So I decided just to trim that off, and it was in there a little bit loose. So I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of hot glue. So then again, if I want to take this apart, I can. And if I just add just a little bit, it'll help hold it in place. But like, it's not going to be so much that I can't take this apart. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I wanted to add this to the back of my fabric along with this Peace on Earth little tag. To make that tag dimensional, I'm adding some foam tape, and I'm adding 3 to 4 layers as I wanted it to be the same thickness as our frame image with the tree. So I am layering the foam tape up on top of each other. I'm just going to measure to make sure it's all good and see how that's looking together. And then all I need to do is remove the backing. You may have to glue this in place. You'll have to just see how sticky your foam tape is. I will eventually have to do that because as I was recording this voiceover, I looked and sure enough, those Peace on Earth words popped off, but I added just a little bit of hot glue on the back of our frame, put that into place, and then you've got a beautiful piece of decor to add to your home for the holiday season. I printed off this quilt pattern from Creative Fabrica. I am going to fill in so I know exactly the colors I want in which block. This was for a more intricate design and it was a little bit too complicated for me as I am not a quilter. So hats off to all you quilters out there. Speaking of which, I would actually like to know, what is a good basic sewing machine that I can get for myself? I want to be able to start to sew some of my projects. I have a sewing machine, but it's older and I don't really want to use it for the crafting projects that I like to do. I want one that will be able to sew through paper as well as fabrics. So if you've got a recommendation, please leave that down below in the comments section for me. All right, so you can see how I'm coloring all my blocks in the pattern that I want to create. And I am going with the traditional Christmas colors for this project. So now I'm just going to do a few measurements so I know the size that I need to cut my scraps of felt. Yes, we're going to be using felt again for this particular project. Again, like I said, I'm not very good when it comes to this sort of thing. I am not a quilter, but I was able to pull it off. I am even going to be measuring the large square as well. And I'm not going to specifically say the measurements that I am doing because I don't know the pattern that you are going to be using. I will link the one that I used down in the video description box. It is, again, from Creative Fabrica, and it is a pattern that was for like a cutting machine, but I just printed out the PDF so then I could get the image and pattern and do this all by hand. All right, so I'm just using my ruler, just quickly measuring out where I need to put my cut marks. I know that there's probably some better, proper ways to do this, but I'm just doing my best here, trying to figure this out as I go along. I used my rotary cutter, but it didn't cut all the way through. I don't think I added enough pressure. So I just resorted to my scissors, and surprisingly enough, I actually did a pretty good job here. Now I'm going to go ahead and start to cut my other pieces, and I am going to use a marker for this. I realize that when it comes to quilting, accuracy does matter. So I did have a few minor errors here and there, but in the end, I didn't really notice them. So I'm just going to go ahead and just cut out my center piece here once I have all my measurements down. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to cut my red as well. Those ones were a little bit trickier. I'm going to start putting things into place on my felt backing that I have there. That's the dark green, and we're going to build on top of that. So here I am just measuring out the red pieces that I needed. And I'm going to be doing multiples of the red because I do need a total of 4 pieces. So, and there's also another little trick that I needed to do, and I will share that one with you for sure. But in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out all my red squares. Okay, so I have all my pieces ready to go, and you can see how well I did with all my pieces. I put them on top of my pattern, and I was pretty good about all my measurements. But here's the thing, I needed to dovetail these red pieces. So I'm finding the center of my squares, and then I'm going to draw a line just to make sure that I have got the middle all the way down. And then I'm going to find the center the opposite way. So I'm just doing a few measurements here just so I know that where I need to place that dovetail. So I'm going to go ahead and just measure on either side so I know where to stop my cut lines when I go to cut this. I'm going to end up connecting the 2 dots that I'm creating. I'm sorry if this is a little bit confusing, but all I'm trying to do is find the center line and then find the opposite center line. So then when I go to cut my dovetail, I'm not cutting all the way through my felt piece. So you can see I've created kind of a cross section, folding my piece in half, and then I'm going to cut from the tip towards the center line line that's opposite. You can see the center line there. I'm going to cut all the way through down to that line, and there we go. When you open it up, you've got a dovetail that is precise. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of my red squares, and then we can start to piece our little quilt together. So here's our pattern. I'm going to place my green square down. I'm just going to, at this point, just put everything into place first, so I know for sure that I've got the right measurements and it's all going to piece together nicely. Once I have my pieces all laid out, I have to say I think I did pretty good. I'm going to be using Heat Bond, the Ultra Hold. I got a big roll of it from Walmart. I figured that this would be easiest for me to get my pattern onto the back panel of my felt project here. So I'm going to lay all my pieces out onto the Heat Bond, and then I'm going to cut the piece out. That way here I know I've got just the right amount. So I'm going to cut that out, and then I'm going to be using my mini press for this as well. You can see this is upside down because you can see all my draw lines or all my measurements that I use from my felt marker. I'm going to just roll back on my piece of Heat Bond because it was curling up really badly, putting it in place, and I'm working on top of a piece of parchment paper. I'm using the lowest heat setting on my Cricut mini press, and I'm going to follow the instructions on my Heat Bond product. So you follow your manufacturer's instructions as well. And you want to let that cool, and I'm going to just check it out, and I have to say it worked really well. I'm going to go ahead and cut around my pattern before I remove the backing. You want to make sure you keep that backing in place until we are done cutting it out. All right, so I finished cutting my pattern out. Now I can peel off that backing. It was a little bit tricky here. I had to try and find a little spot to peel the paper back in. I don't have very long fingernails, so just take your time. Figured that out, and I was amazed. It's held all together. Now I've got my backing here, the dark green fabric, dark green felt. I put my image into place, and now you can go ahead and continue to follow the instructions of your product. I am using, again, some parchment paper and using my mini press, and I'm going to adhere all the pieces together onto the dark green felt. I have to say, I went over it once more and it held together really, really well. So for a hanger, I decided to use a branch. I was just kind of playing around a little bit here. I wanted to use this piece of branch here with the little branches coming off, but it just was not working. So I just resorted to just a nice straight branch here. I'm going to be using some embroidery floss to tie it around the branch. So putting the needle through the top corner, wrapping it around the branch, and then I'm going to tie it off with a knot. That way here, it is going to stay in place. It's not going to pop off on me. You may need to add a touch of hot glue if you feel you need that. Go right ahead. I didn't bother at this point. I'm also being careful not to get it too tight because I wanted to have a little bit of movement in case I needed to make any adjustments. So once you have your knot in place, you can just continue to add some stitches. So I'm going in through the back, wrapping it around the branch, and I'm going to go in or through the back again, and I'm going to continue to loop my thread along the branch until I get to the other end. And then I'm going to tie another knot off on the opposite end. All right, so you can see I've finished with the embroidery thread. I'm just trimming off the excess, and this is where you can add a little bit of hot glue to those knots just to prevent them from coming apart. I just added just the tiniest little bit of glue. You won't even really see it, but it was enough to hold those knots in place. Now I'm going to use this red twine that I had in my stash. It was starting to fray a little bit, so I just tied a knot off on one end. I'm going to wrap it around the one end, kind of like a banner, and I'm going to tie that onto the branch, and then I'm going to go ahead and do that the same for the opposite side, and I will cut things down as needed just so that it looks more in proportion. Another thing I just wanted to add, if you feel like you need to add a backing, more backing to your green felt, go ahead and do that. You could add another piece of green felt or maybe a nice sturdy piece of chipboard, whatever you'd like, but that's it. This would be great to add to a package, but I decided to use mine as a Christmas ornament. I hope this has inspired you to dig out your fabrics to create some beautiful Christmas crafts. I have another video for you to check out right here that's all about more fabric scraps to use up. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.